Why smart people embrace confusion. Do this instead of overthinking. There's something strange that happens when we begin to think deeply. At first, it feels like a superpower. We analyze, connect dots, anticipate outcomes. Our minds move quickly, dissecting every angle. But eventually something shifts. That sharpness turns into paralysis. The thinking becomes recursive, looping back on itself. We try to solve problems by thinking harder, and instead we sink deeper into uncertainty. We second guess, we hesitate, we get stuck. And at a certain point, we begin to feel like our intelligence, this very thing that sets us apart, is actually working against us. But what if that wasn't a flaw? What if confusion isn't a sign of failure, but a sign that your mind is stepping beyond the shallow end of reason? Smart people don't get stuck because they're slow. They get stuck because they see too much. They see the complexity in every choice, the nuance in every argument, the possibility of being wrong in every direction. That level of awareness is powerful, but it can also be paralyzing. And the mistake we often make is assuming that the solution to confusion is more thinking. But Carl Jung and many of the greatest minds in philosophy would completely disagree. Jung believed that overthinking is a symptom of an imbalance. It's what happens when we try to use logic to solve problems that actually require something else: intuition, surrender, or even silence.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's what most people miss. Not every question has an immediate answer. Not every dilemma is meant to be solved instantly. Some questions, especially the big ones like, who am I? What should I do with my life? What is the right path? Are not puzzles with solutions. They're experiences to be lived through. And when we try to shortcut that process by thinking our way out of it, we don't grow, we just avoid. Jung once said, "You do not solve the problem, you outgrow it." That's a completely different mindset. It means that instead of treating confusion as a flaw, we treat it as a signal that we're on the edge of transformation. So here's the shift. Smart people don't escape confusion by thinking more, they escape it by thinking differently. They embrace confusion as part of the process. They stop trying to force clarity and instead develop the patience to let it unfold. They trust that the unconscious mind, what Jung called the self, is working behind the scenes, integrating, evolving, moving toward wholeness. That doesn't mean you sit and do nothing. It means you stop trying to dominate the problem with intellect and instead partner with it. You observe it, you reflect, you feel, you move your body, you create, you dream, and in doing so you create the space for insight to emerge. Not from control, but from connection. This is why some of the most intelligent people in history, Einstein, Da Vinci, Jung himself, spent long periods in what looked like confusion. They wondered, they questioned, they allowed themselves to not know, because they understood that wisdom isn't found in the rush to answer, it's found in the courage to stand inside the question. And in our hyper-optimized, productivity-obsessed culture, that feels almost rebellious. We're trained to fear the unknown, to fill silence with noise, to chase certainty like it's oxygen. But the truth is, the most important shifts in your life will not come from certainty, they will come from your ability to stay present inside the fog. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you felt truly confused, and instead of rushing to fix it, you just watched it? What did you feel? What did you fear? What did you discover about yourself when you gave up the demand for clarity? Because I promise you, there's something sacred in that space. Confusion is not chaos, it's a reordering. It's the moment before insight, the crack before the light comes in. The ego hates it because it can't control it, but the soul needs it because it's where real growth happens. So what do smart people do differently? They don't resist confusion, they respect it. They treat it like a teacher. They stop overthinking and start listening to their instincts, to their dreams, to the subtle signals that logic alone can't detect. They realize that the goal isn't to eliminate uncertainty, but to develop a relationship with it, to become familiar with not knowing, to trust the inner unfolding, even when the outer world is screaming for answers. And that's the real secret. Embracing confusion is not the opposite of intelligence. It's the evolution of it. It's what happens when your mind becomes deep enough to admit its limits and wise enough to let something deeper take over. The intelligence trap. How thinking too much makes you see too little. There's a trap hidden inside intelligence, and what makes it so dangerous is that it feels like strength. We're taught to analyze, solve, optimize. So when something isn't working, we double down. We think more, harder, faster. We turn every problem into a mental battlefield, as if the right thought, the perfect insight, will finally crack the code. But Carl Jung, and many who followed after him, warned us that this is precisely where intelligence becomes its own enemy. Because the more you rely on the intellect alone, the more you cut yourself off from the very parts of you that are designed to see what thinking can. Let's break that down. The rational mind is a tool, a powerful one. It helps us navigate, plan, protect. But it has limits. It's linear, language-based, and rooted in the known. It works best with systems, patterns, and logic. But life isn't always logical. Emotions aren't linear. Meaning isn't mathematical. And the deepest truths, the kind that change your direction, heal your wounds, or awaken your purpose, don't arrive through deduction. They arrive through insight, through intuition, through silence. And when we're stuck in the intelligence trap, we block those very channels. We're so busy thinking that we forget how to see. Think about it. How many times have you overanalyzed a decision to the point of paralysis? Or tried to understand your emotions by dissecting them until they no longer feel real? Or stayed in your head so long that you lost connection with your body, your heart, your instincts? That's not intelligence, that's imbalance. And Jung would tell us that when the conscious mind becomes inflated, when it believes it can master everything through thought, it falls into shadow. It begins to mistake control for clarity. It begins to reject what it can't explain. And that's when the real damage begins. The intelligence trap doesn't look like failure. It often looks like productivity, competence, even success. But underneath, there's a kind of deadness, a numbness, a growing sense of disconnection. Because without access to the unconscious, without a relationship to the parts of ourselves that whisper rather than shout, we become rigid. We lose creativity, we lose flow, we lose the ability to adapt. And worst of all, we start to fear not knowing. We treat uncertainty as a threat instead of what it actually is, an invitation. The invitation is this: Step outside the mind. Not permanently, just long enough to let it rest, to let other forms of knowing emerge. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of dreams, symbols, and the imagination as pathways to the self. These aren't childish fantasies, they're languages of the unconscious, ways your deeper mind tries to guide you when logic has reached its limit. But if you're stuck in the intelligence trap, you dismiss them. You say, "That's not practical," or "That doesn't make sense." And in doing so, you miss the very guidance that could save you. So how do we escape this trap? The answer isn't to stop thinking, it's to rebalance, to reclaim the other faculties we've been trained to ignore. That means listening to your body, noticing how it reacts before your mind catches up. That means paying attention to your dreams, not to decode them like puzzles, but to feel what they're trying to reveal. It means learning to sit with a question without rushing to answer it. It means stepping into nature, art, silence, places where the mind softens and something deeper can emerge. And most of all, it means humility. The humility to admit that no matter how smart you are not all-knowing. That your conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg. That your real power comes not from domination, but from integration. When you bring together the thinking mind, the feeling heart, the sensing body, and the intuitive soul, you become something far greater than smart. You become whole. So ask yourself, what might you be missing? Not because it's hidden, but because you're looking too hard. What might already be trying to reach you if only you'd stop thinking long enough to listen? The wisdom of stillness. Why doing nothing is sometimes the smartest move. In a world obsessed with action, doing nothing feels like a sin. We're conditioned to move fast, to fix, to respond, to be productive at all costs. If you're not doing something, it must mean you're falling behind. But Carl Jung and many of the deepest wisdom traditions tell us the opposite. That sometimes the most intelligent, most courageous thing you can do is nothing. Not out of laziness, but out of respect for the process unfolding within you. Not because you've given up, but because you've learned to trust that clarity often arises not from effort, but from stillness, confusion, uncertainty, emotional chaos. These are not problems to be solved, they are signals, they are invitations to slow down, to listen. And yet, we treat them like emergencies. We rush to fix the anxiety, to answer the question, to force a decision. But what if that urgency is the problem? What if the very act of trying to escape the discomfort is what prevents the insight from arriving? Jung believed that the psyche has its own rhythm, its own timing. You can't rush inner growth. You can't force a revelation. You can only prepare the space for it to come. And that requires stillness. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the presence of awareness. It's what happens when you stop chasing and start observing. When you let the waves settle so the water becomes clear. In that space, something remarkable happens. Your unconscious begins to speak. It speaks not in words, but in feelings, images, symbols. And if you're quiet enough, you'll hear it. You'll feel the tug toward a decision you hadn't considered. You'll notice the subtle resistance you were trying to ignore. You'll remember something you forgot, something that changes everything. But none of that happens when you're sprinting from problem to solution like a rat in a maze. Let's be honest, stillness is hard, especially for smart people. We're used to solving, We're uncomfortable with waiting. We want to do something, but that impulse to act before understanding is often the thing that leads us deeper into confusion. We act too soon. We choose too fast. We compromise our truth for the sake of resolution, and then we wonder why the peace doesn't last. But peace is not the product of fast decision, it's the result of aligned ones. And alignment only comes when you give yourself enough space to hear your deeper knowing. There's a paradox here. Sometimes the smartest move is to stop trying to be smart, to pause, to rest, to let go of the need to be right or fast or productive, to embrace the silence not as emptiness, but as the womb of insight. Think about how many times in your life the answer came after you stopped searching. In the shower, on a walk, at 2 a.m. when you finally gave up. That's not a coincidence. That's your psyche doing its work the moment you get out of the way. Jung said, "You are not in control of your unconscious, but you can meet it halfway. Stillness is how you meet it. And when you do, the wisdom that emerges is not just intellectual, it's embodied. It feels right, not because you've reasoned it out, but because it resonates, it lands, it fits. That's the kind of wisdom that can't be forced, it can only be received." So ask yourself, what are you trying to force right now? What would happen if you stopped pushing, stopped fixing, and just listened? What might appear in the silence if you gave it a chance? Because sometimes the answer isn't found by doing more, it's found by doing less, by being still, by letting the wisdom you already carry rise to the surface, quietly, naturally, in its own time. From overthinking to inner knowing, how to trust what you already know. There comes a point, often after we've exhausted every mental strategy, every logical analysis, every pros and cons list, where we realize that clarity isn't something we find by thinking harder, it's something we uncover by trusting deeper. Carl Jung believed that beneath the noise of the conscious mind lies a deeper intelligence, what he called the self. This isn't the ego. It's not the persona we show to the world, it's the totality of who we are, known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, and it already knows what we need. The problem is, we've been trained to ignore it. Overthinking is often a substitute for trust. When we doubt ourselves, we try to compensate with logic. We spin scenarios, analyze every angle, hoping that certainty will rise from the wreckage of our mental effort. But the truth is, overthinking usually signals that we're not listening to what we already know. That knowing may be subtle, a quiet nudge, a gut feeling, a dream we can't stop thinking about, but it's there. And we've all had moments when we ignored it, only to realize later it was right all along. So how do we shift from overthinking to inner knowing? First, we have to accept that not all truth comes through thought. Some comes through feeling, through resonance, through the body, through the strange but undeniable sense that this is right or this is wrong, even when we can't explain why. Jung called this the voice of the unconscious, and he believed that when we ignore it, we fragment ourselves. We trust the mind but not the heart. We trust logic but not instinct. And in doing so, we become split. Hyper-intelligent, yet deeply uncertain. Reconnecting to inner knowing means slowing down. It means creating space in your life for quiet, not just outer quiet, but inner quiet. It means paying attention to the moments when your body tightens or softens, when your energy rises or drops, when something just feels off. These are not irrational impulses, they're data. They're the language of the deeper self, trying to guide you toward alignment. And perhaps most importantly, it means practicing self-trust. Not blind confidence, but a willingness to act on your deeper sense of truth, even when you don't have all the answers, even when it doesn't make perfect sense. Because that's how you build the muscle of intuition. You listen, you act, you learn, and slowly you begin to realize something powerful. You already know more than you think. So I'll leave you with this. What decision are you trying to think your way through right now? What would happen if you stopped asking for more information and started trusting what you already feel? What if the wisdom you've been chasing has been inside you this whole time, waiting patiently for you to listen? Because in the end, the smartest people are not the ones who think the most. They're the ones who know when to stop thinking and start trusting.